Steve Chorja agus Walter Quigan Kate Lehoracht Ella. Hamid Contas Nula Louis de Clare. It's that time of year where it gets dark and cold and wet, and we all spend loads of money that we don't have on poetry books. And I'm very happy to have just bought a copy of Louis's latest book, Cea Varig, Emma Vic Bahuna, agus mé súl gomór leis a léamh. Madam Tommy just chun dír bhaisnéisi ar bhaisnéisi a léamh dír chun learán so. Fáilte wrote Louis. Louis's most recent collections are Cea Varig, Emma Vic Bahuna, Obervalja, Govilas Vehehen, and Gra Fear, Govilas Vehedó. He's been involved with the contemporary renaissance of poetry in Irish, and Ireland, since 1980, when he first published in the poetry journal Inti, which he subsequently edited for a time. That's probably the most understated bahashnéis you could give for this man, because he's a household name in Ireland. Anyone, whether you're Irish or not, if you grew up in Ireland, you know the name Louis de Clare. Fáilte wrote Louis agus go nairi leat.
Gur míle mágat a son Julie agus go míle maith agah féin go chéan agah as fannacht an so díanach san ihe agus scris ar an bharing an cearta gom agus léan scris ar a bharing. As Julie mentioned, I have a new book out. It's called Cea Varig, Emma Vic Bahuna, and I'm going to read pretty much all the poems I'm reading will be from it. I don't have translations for that many of them, so I'm just going to read the ones for which I do have translations, but there's one other poem at least that I'll read in Irish alone. This book took longer than usual to put together because the structure of the book didn't really declare itself, even though I had the poems written quite a while ago. And it wasn't until I realised that the 4 or 5 political rants that are in the book were really the Knav drama through the whole book, and rather than trying to be a bit squeamish and subtle about it, I thought one of them has to give the book its title and make it clear that this is a political book. Cea Varig, Emma Vic Bahuna declares it, I suppose, right from the outset, who killed Emma Vic Bahuna. There's a poem there also for Vicky Phelan. There's a poem in tribute to Sinead O'Connor, which is also a political poem. But the poem I'm going to read is a poem called Rusk. It's funny, I was listening to what both Paula and Seamus Barra were saying earlier about sound, and I realised one of the reasons that these poems, I haven't translated them, is that I think the sound of fury, for me at least, works far better in Irish than it does in English. I found it really difficult to find a register for these in English, so even if you don't have Irish or only a little of it, the anger of the sounds should impress themselves upon you anyway. But I wrote this poem, Rusk, which translates as rant, I suppose. It also might mean a chant of a kind. I wrote it after the last general election, when the leader of the party that received the second largest number of votes, decided unilaterally that under no circumstances would he negotiate to form a government with the party that got the largest number of votes. I thought it was an extraordinary moment for Irish democracy because of COVID. It wasn't much scrutinised, but suddenly an election result which was interpreted by everybody as a clear desire on the part of the electorate for significant change was interpreted as a kind of a nudge back into power for the same parties who had been rebuked some months earlier. And because there was so little said about it, it occurs to me that it could happen again this time around. And if it does, then there can never be any change of government, because Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael will always be in the top 3. And I'm surprised there isn't more discussion about all of this. The very idea that they're so far apart from each other, the very same government that wants Palestinians and Israelis to talk to each other, that wants Protestants and Catholics to live in peace and harmony in the north of Ireland, cannot imagine that it's possible to have a discussion between parties that are vaguely left and vaguely right, or very right of centre. The idea that Fianna Fáil and Sinn Féin couldn't negotiate is just beyond belief. And I don't think it would even work in Turner's Cross, would it? So it's worth keeping an eye on what happens here. But this is the poem. I was pretty angry when I wrote it, and here it goes. Ní trá súine sé seo rinne, trá dóchas ná muinteris, ach ré an áiris, airis an lehelis is an uignis. Treis gach éhig, gach buile fíl, taid fós I réim, súil chléach is clús bhár, béal craifach is crí knó, mé féin I gúcht uair a bhain eile. Ní cadavach sim in éon ní, ach an líne is déanaí líne, an skethe Maria, on ifig, on rein, on devestig de hach lein, na focail bhuara a deachtaíag don ara maidin, nar bheig brov, nar aharig faic. Tá míid fian I ghirfúr, chun cairí is geocaig a ruige, maistíní is madarí lahí a rascart, an bocht is an nocht a uascailt, is flachas an duine a ágart. Agus fós, tá míid clipithe, scuite, ídithe ag iminí, is ag fuacht na féine nach féidir a leis. Tucaig an lá, ach ní go fóile ag ra haar. I'll read. Thank you. Very different kind of a poem now. It's a poem, I suppose you could say it's a kind of a subgenre in which the outstanding example is Paul Durkin's Raymond of the Rooftops, where the woman is out in the real world struggling to prevent the house falling down, while the poet is at his work in the other world, unable to come and help his wife because he's giving everything he's got to writing this poem. So it's a poem addressing the division of labour in a house where one party is engaged in writing. It's called Ag Obair Savailia. Arín an ochar chón sa doras rín, the hail ard is the glór queen na fiachrí, dhéanais éní farúil, nó banúil féinachrí, ó chuas amach moch maidin, is sarú rialta sí, agla sí, is faragí múra, ag counsú daine míhí víalta. Troscán dán a bhoga, clop a laivan nó a chur ocail bocht a bhfuil a glúine mo in a hrós ar caite. Inistum, cad I dhéanais a stór, gur a bhiúdum teacht a bhaile in a chóir. Díal faic a deirm, ach cuid bheog den ám ró ghear atá fantagum sa péil seo a chahabh, nó go dúcfa chun siachán an tearman a hógasa I d'éagmas a choróbha, an I cehernig I ceilúras a chathir, mochán gan dían is an tríador dernach sa tír seo írig, I bhaifar a chorp go ceann níosa. Working at home, I hear the buckled key in the stiff lock, your high heels and low voice asking softly, have you done anything manly or womanly, my love, since I went out bright and early, tackling governments, churches and raging seas, dealing with uncivilized people? Did you perhaps rearrange the furniture of a poem, put a new suit of second-hand clothes on some misfortunate word whose knees were showing through his worn-out jeans? Go on, tell me what you did, my dear, so it was worth my while coming home to you here. Damn thing, I said. Only spend a bit more of what little time we have left in this place till you came back to destroy the deathly peace of this sanctuary I built in your absence. The rebels are already celebrating in town. My poem has no roof, and the last Thatcher in the world has gone absent without leave. His body won't be found for a month at least. There you go. Nothing really to be said about this is a love poem, except that the last word is tréig in Irish. So tréig is to abandon or desert somebody, but it's also to fade or to bleach. So the colour of your hair could be tréig, bratacha. Níadhí ará fútsa an méid a dúirt MacDiarmid a dúirt rilke faoin man I man a léithe thugasteach áileacht a gné mar a bheith bratacha daite an bhaidin in íag na féile. Treis gach bríthircha catharga, tá do bhratacha a following sa ré loscathe os ciún na bhuirgantí scrista. Ní rahra siad riamh a na, it's lúna son fós má phréig. Flags. It could never be said of you what Rilke said, according to Hugh MacDiarmid, about the woman in her middle years who took in her good looks like coloured flags the morning after the carnival. After all our civil wars, your flags fly at full mast in the flaming wind above the burned-out buildings. They never changed sides, never once faded or fled. And on the same topic, a poem called A Willer Olas a Gwing Fe Frotestúnig. My partner, who'll be here shortly, she'll be bound to be late, but she'll make an interest in any event, so I'll get this out of the way before she comes. We're not religious people, but she grew up in the other tradition in the Church of Ireland and is appalled at how little we appear to know about these exotic creatures who have dwelt amongst us for a very long time. So the poem is my response to that, which is to say we actually know a lot of things about Protestants, and it's almost a page of things. And I'll go through it in due course. There's a reference here, the saints that used to be held up to us as models of how you'd behave as a child. And I think about it, when any of us thinks about it, like Maria Goretti, that's a fairly tall order now, isn't it? And the other one, specific to Cork, Little Nelly. Does anybody talk about Little Nelly of Holy God anymore? But anyway, other places people don't know who Little Nelly is, I have to tell them, explain it to them. There you go. Here it goes. A Willer Olas a Gwing Fe Frotestúnig. Dina McCanta. That was the one thing I always remember at home. Sometimes they'd be talking with parents when we were small, and they'd drop their voice. He's a Protestant, and they weren't being mean about it. But the one thing that was crystal clear was they were way nicer people than us, right? So that's where the poem starts. Dina McCanta, ní honan is singhain, ní lisa fós con is téanamh prátaí a veru na breag cheart a ancient. Ní chredan siad sa bhaid an bhuire, ná sa bhaid an bhara, Maria Goretti, ná Little Nelly, ein ní a bhéidir de bhéirechar dréir George Bernard Shaw. Tá na fir buí an grían, lífa, land ar ire, na maná, fiún, súil chorm, acalí. Nuair héan siad haar bride, seasan rósanna ara, nochtan pepini a gríthe leonta, chur an tréchan catlicach, a cheann tarnappa fin a scíhan crapathe. Enad bleiten a danimnegiad, a bhuindóibh folklóir rúnda, pantry, cool chisten, preserves, suv, pudding, mílseog, ginger beer. Ní chéan siad fuistin ach lauran go díreach le dia, gan caras a chuirt, na engel crídachta, ná tachta dála. Dína maha, ní léon ní diantacha, bo gá a bhav. Har a sin a rinne, taid cho hulk, cho het leis a good elegin. Nos gear go meig, le cún of day is a bháthar banahe. All we know about Protestants. Decent people, not at all like us. They still don't know how to make tea, boil potatoes, tell proper lies. They don't believe in the Virgin Mary, in mermaids, Maria Goretti, or Little Nelly. Anything you could put your finger on, according to George Bernard Shaw. The men are tanned, well-spoken, sincere. The women, blonde, blue-eyed, agile. They walk by, roses stand to attention. Poppies bare their wounded hearts. A Catholic Crowe puts his turnip head under his broken wing. Enid Blyton baptized them and taught them their secret language, settee, couch, preserves, jam, pudding, dessert, ginger beer. They don't go to confession, but speak directly to God, with no cronies, guardian angels, RTDs to help them. They're so honest, they've done nothing that requires forgiveness. Apart from that, my friend, they're every bit as bad, as odd as the rest of us, or they will be soon enough with the help of God and his blessed mother. Don't be encouraging me. This is a poem called Farilla, a was thinking if you can have a Bonilla, then surely you can have Farrell as well. And it's a poem, an elegy for Philip Levine, really fine American poet, died in 2015. Grew up in Detroit, working class, worked in factories, and gives voice to the experience, particularly of men of a particular kind who worked in those factories on early morning and late night shifts, for whom violence was always very close. And he writes really, really interesting about a kind of masculinity that is problematic, and in a way that's very, very sympathetic. In any event, the poem starts with, I was fortunate enough to be at a poetry festival in Catalonia with him, and we were on a train journey together from Lleida to Barcelona, and he was talking about having been there during Franco's regime, but at one stage he said he was just complaining about how the world had gotten so polite and all the rest of it. He said, it's gone so you can't even smack anyone, Louis. By which he didn't mean smack a child, he meant punch somebody, and that was a terrible thing in his mind. So the poem opens with that, and then it finishes with lines taken directly from his last book, which is a really terrific book. So I'll read it in Irish and then the translation. If I have it there, I do. Farrell, the Philip Levine. It's gotten so you can't even smack anyone, sé. A fiachant on drein amach, héal a bhí gemachtúig gan stad. As garúint le dawan na bhar a hig trodarach dorn níos fearr na béal na host a réapach an críonat le foiir gan chuine. Níor jacar haulú I mon ingel moch maidin nó dain san ihe a trid nor bagá sun le crippin na folla an hain nús a bhar eile rimis a uarú. A dridum le ceann scríbe bhí sé chó sean le garsún an gaelchuid. A gírig an sail a alpa tre spiaclaí róra is fiacla mountacha. A chla rómhúrdó mar bheith scoip chun fáis fága ínte ag máthir hísach. Tá chud dáanta a teachtá, muinchilí fada lúsáiltha ortha is fuialach spáis don grí nar chrap go fáil. Fiú is gúil na focail mí cheart is ar ngothanna as tún sé. Canamís chó láidir is atá oning. Dóibh siúd go léir a bhí maol le gánaí sa péil seo a thug dúing ní smó na mar a bhain sé riamh dín. Is an tarnahuair sé, don drom beag san nar tháinig sláán agus fós nar ghéal, and even a third wouldn't hurt sé. It's gotten so you can't even smack anyone, he said, staring through the train window at a world going by without stopping. Away from a world of men who understood the stuttering elocution of fists better than sweet talk that would trip you up and rip your heart out with its hidden blade. Not difficult to imagine him manning a machine in the early morning or the night shift, fighting his corner when pushed to cool the roaring blood in another man's heart or his own. As the station drew near, he was still thin as a young man on short rations, looking to swallow the world through thick glasses and crooked teeth, his suit too big for him, as if a thrifty mother had left room for him to grow. His poems are made to the same measure, long, loose sleeves and acres of space for the heart that can't be cut down to size. Even if the words are all wrong, he says, let's sing as loud as we can for ourselves and all those who were always late or slow in this world that gave us more than it took. A second time for those few who did not come through and still did not give up, and even a third wouldn't hurt, he said. I'll just go on. I had already decided I was going to read this poem before I realised just how suitable to the place we're in it is. It's called An Paor de Haas, South Parish, a poem for Liam O'Mirrilla. And a few things maybe to say about the poem. Much of what's in this came out of a series of 3 interviews I did with Liam when he knew he was dying, and there was extraordinary strength in everything that he had to say, and even in his voice there was this extraordinary vigour that was still there, and it's an extraordinary idea that somebody approaching his own death was still keen to talk for hours at a time about the Irish language, about our complicated relationship with it, about poetry and why it mattered. And some of that makes its way into this poem. The girl referred to in the opening line of the poem is Elaine Chillinine, who told him that, we're just trying to see where we are here now, that when her governess used to take her on her bike downtown and they were coming up George's Quay, when they came to Mary Street, she'd say, don't ever go in there, don't ever go down there. So that's the start of it, because that was into Liam's world and the rest of it. There's a reference also to no man's long, an idea that Liam was very taken with, that I think he got from the Arabic writer Asiya Jabbar, but I didn't have time to check it. This idea that in a colonized country, you're always caught between two languages which are not entirely yours. So there's this idea it's no man's land than no man's land. And towards the end of the poem, he's buried in the graveyard as Sean O'Riordan and Sean O'Riordan in particular being a huge figure for Liam, and he should hear echoes of Egon O'Rahilla and Eileen Dovney Chunnell towards the end of the poem. Próiste has to Liam O'Mirla. Don't go in there, a dúirt an governess leis an gailín a raibh truchadó crown úl in Ngardín am Wintere. Ach bhí sé ag a baile sa chúltráid a bhí plódathe ag na beo is na maribh, mar bhfuil an tua is an chathair inis is an áulód le chéile I dictarna bín do bháthar. Chaist de héal a tochailt gur nochtaigh guhanna baite sa láid bréomhór Laura, nóir a Pruxmut agus Virgie Ryan, Walter Vigilans is fear na hawan a dúiltaigh gifte do chuid focail, fuck off with your Irish, give me my voice, like. Vairdir onat agus tríd, the Russian a chur íorthar chorcaí tre lasa le mórta sa chóireamh, John Hart is Maggie Howley, Miss Paris Nadia go trí a gíal ite id ailse, Michael agus Finbar de leanúint go bhuaidir an ní a bhí uatha. Céalaíodh tusa idir dhá lín a Liam, Graim an dá bhrúach agat no man's long a héir tú le fuil agus alas de fin, gur aimsigh do stáidse féin sa ghaol idir dhá thro na hawan, drithid guagach dianta docail, gur féidir hiúil anis I de haunta. Is linge fasta an chuid sin dín héin a nochta tú doing I bhuiram VRC, sar chuis le seaach na léach don scoil, mar bhfuil míad na fós a fáil an port is léin, agus sibse I gúmpar cré is cloch, ó riada, ó riordain, ó muirle, corcaig. Don't go in there, said the governess to the girl with 32 apple trees in the family garden. But you were at home in the back streets among the dead and the living, where the city and the country long ago and right now came together at the gable end of your mother's fabled bar. You spent a lifetime digging down till you heard the voices drowning in the pre-verbal slime. Nora Pruxmut and Virgie Ryan, Walter Vigilans and the Riverman who refused the gift of your words. Fuck off with your Irish, give me my voice, like. They lived in you and through you. The Russian who set the whole of West Cork ablaze with the glory of his wake. John Hart and Maggie Howley, Miss Paris, 1903, cancer gnawing her breast. Michael and Finbar following you around till they got what they needed from you. You were born between two rivers and times, Liam, holding on for dear life to the no man's long you claimed with the sweat and blood of your pen, till you found a landing place in the fork between the two arms of the river, a shaky bridge of words we can now walk side by side with you. We have it now, that part of ourselves you opened up to us in verse before you went with the best of them to enter that school where we are still learning how to speak and sing while you're shouldering earth and stone. O riada, O riordain, O muirle Cork. Actually, I was going to do one more, but if I can sneak in a really short one, I can find it. I don't think this needs much explanation. I wrote it in July this year when there were those awful things happening in Dublin along the Grand Canal, and within a very short period of time the word tent went from being an image of the most extraordinary fragility, the bare minimum of shelter that a human being might expect from a state where they'd sought shelter, and then it was turned on its head to be somehow an affront or a threat to us all, and the state itself mobilised its forces against the people who were completely dependent on them. I think it's good to remind ourselves, for all the awfulness of what individual actors and groups did, it was the state itself principally that moved against the tents in Dublin. And when I was writing this poem, in the back of my mind I was thinking, it's not in the poem but it's there somewhere. I was thinking of Owen and Patrick Pearse's story, in which the birds from Africa bring warmth and life and breath to Ireland, and when they go, it's death for the child. And I was thinking also, because I'm doing a lot of work on Pearse at the moment, the state for which he fought and died is not one in which those things would have been seen as an appropriate use of the apparatus of the state. His definitions of what constitutes Irishness in material that's not yet collected, and collecting it myself at the moment, is so crystal clear and enabling and very necessary to go back to him, I think, in our time. So this poem is called July 2024. Ligort na fecin tuiad a rinne, an éamle on Afric a hugan saura go héring, dior a gréine mar a ngob is tas an vaile a prabernach fen a glúv, dúv, bán agus riamach. Na scaunra giad is tu a dul her bride, ní fada go grappig crag an hírig na pobl bheoga áhis, a bhlahíon na grí gach firvis maná, léhananta mar seo, nor buchóilet na fillach an dirihacht go brach. Thereon you don't see them, the birds from Africa that brought summer to Ireland, sundrops dripping from their beaks and the heat of home fluttering under black, white and piebald feathers. Don't frighten them as you pass by. Too soon the twisted claws of winter will collapse those little tents of joy that bloom in the heart of every woman and man on days like these, when it seems as if the dark might never return. Just turn wine ever I'm just going to finish with this poem, which represents a sequence of poems, slightly more optimistic poems, leaning towards the light, I suppose. I was in a very fortunate position for some years where my father and mother were still alive and my own grandchildren were coming into the world, so that there was a living connection between 4 generations of the one family. And I was struck by the fact that in the Irish tradition, the Derafina, we're told, legally, the family unit was the Derafina, the common descendants of a single great-grandfather. We're all the same gang, the same crew. And it always seemed to me when I was younger that that's way too long. You couldn't really belong in that group. And then I found myself in the middle of just exactly that kind of group. And it made the most perfect sense to me, the reach back into history and the reach forward into the future. So I wrote this poem just after the birth of the first of now 8 grandchildren. And it's called Slí na Fíringe. Táim sirí ina láthir, cho críanna le bradán as a ró, nís óigan a vís sa maithróg as a máthir siúd in bacling, trí seachtainna sa raibh bartathe dé techt i do sach bhí na marabh. An tám bonos ciún ó hin is mé handaine cho sinnant an ish, nar cheart mé ligan trasna an bhóthir leom héin sa diracht. An a dahanna go léir, a bhailig an talamh an spéir a scaga tre chuile linmh ná feather fós, cin da is fearr a hagandé, sa solas a hínan, ó bharacíní trí an tánacha cos go dtí súil lí a maithir, ó bhfuil a láimh ar mo thualing ar chlíhan an bhóthir bhuair. An leanamh na seasa bhedring, lóchran na cín áráling nach gá é an agala festa. Ní áca sí an áitseo, go bheice sí rá scail a banúide, ón áid hawl a phréig sí ar bawl an tíoríocht fáisce in a dorn. Hereafter, I'm deathless in her presence, old as the salmon of Asaro, younger than I was as a young father holding her mother 3 weeks before she was due, in the beginning of the month of the dead. Time has been out of kilter ever since, and I'm so old and innocent tonight. I shouldn't be left across the road on my own in the dark. All the colours the earth has gathered from the sky are sifted through the eyes of a child who can't decide which one suits her best. In the light that stretches from her triangular toes to my father's grey eyes as he keeps his hand on my shoulder on the edge of the main road. The child stands between us, a lantern telling us there's no need to be afraid anymore. She won't leave here till she sees two shadows waving back from the other side she left behind just now, eternity gripped in her fist. Gurmila Mahagwith.
Sin go láidir luachfar agus macánta Louis de Puer gur míle maith Louis. Míle buchas. Tá míad go bogaráid go Mexico, an Ceartlan, and just before we bugger to the other side of the world, just to take a moment to appreciate Paul Casey, seriously, like, I mean, the man behind the controls there. No, but seriously, like, not only for the work you've done for O'Vale since forever, but since it became hybrid, like, I don't know what you do back there with those 3 computers, but you're doing it well, so fair play. You know, it's just this untach an rudé a bheith able to cur a chóirt the rianer fud down like winter warmer. So it's a great, lovely element to the festival. So our next poets are Pedro Serrano and Anna Crowe. Pedro Serrano was awarded a Guggenheim Poetry Fellowship in 2007. He teaches in the Faculty of Philosophy and Letters, which I want to know loads more about, at the National Autonomous University of Mexico in Mexico City, and is editor of UNAM's highly regarded poetry website, Periodico de Poesia. The Conjurer is his second book from ARC Publications and is translated by Anna Crowe. Anna Crowe, poet and translator, is the author of 4 poetry collections and 3 chapbooks. The first collection of her translations of Pedro Serrano's work, Peatlands, was published by ARC in 2014. She has lived in Fife with her partner, Dr. Julian Crowe, since 1986. In 1998, with Brian Johnstone and Dr. Gavin Bowd, she founded Stanza, Scotland's International Poetry Festival. So, what you found? Hey. So, Fáilte Bhórov, welcome to Winter Warmer, and I hope you enjoy your reading.
Suppose it's my time now, no?
Yes.
Well, I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for everybody who is involved in this reading, and thanks, Hannah, for translating my poems and making them more interesting even for me. I was in Cork several years ago, and I remember it as a fascinating time in my life, and also I want to say that after listening to the previous poems, I lived in London in the 80s during the Troubles, so everything is kind of coming together for me at this moment. I just want to say also that last month I saw a wonderful choreography by oh dear, I've forgotten. Sorry. Well, forget about that. It's an Irish choreographer that was talking about becoming a dancer. And I realized seeing him that dance is very important for me. And I think that the way I work with words is I found it seeing his choreography that it comes from dance. It's the way I see choreographers working with bodies. No, I'm going to read. The first poem is called Ramas and Amherst Road. It's several of these poems have to do with London, and well, Ramas en Amherst Road. Como espigas los troncos alineados, corales fugitivos en el bosque de niebla, elevadas astillas y griterío, telaraña aterida y estresada. Las ramas negras sobre el cielo raso, desecada toda profundidad, garabatos y tachaduras en profusión, arañazos en el papel gris de enero. Contra la dura pared de cielo abierto, un muro de cal azul e infinito cobalto, crece la enredadera de las ramas. Entregadas al aire se desmenuzan, pielecilla de polvo y de durazno, quieta genuflexión hacia la tierra. En el aire raíces congeladas. Como una red las ramas, como una llamarada. Como brazos de viento levantadas. Crucifixión del cielo, garabato. Thanks.
Branches on Amherst Road. Like ears of wheat, these tree trunks in a row, fugitive corals in the thicket of fog, lofty kindling and uproar, spider's web rigid, taut with cold, black branches against the sky's flat roof, all depth sucked dry, scrawls and erasures in profusion, scratches on January's grey paper. Against the hard wall of open sky, a lime wall of blue and infinite cobalt, this bramble knot of branches grows. Surrendering to the air, they crumble, flakes of dust and peach tree, a quiet kneeling earthwards. Frozen roots up in the air. Like a net, the branches, like a sudden flare-up, like arms of wind uplifted, a crucified sky, a grapnel.
The choreographer is Michael Keegan Dolan, and the piece was How to Be a Dancer in several easy lessons. No. The previous poem was dedicated to Wada Marengo, a friend of mine. And the next poem, Helada en Oxon, is to Karan Brothers. Helada en Oxon. El campo gélido, asfixiado por una luz transfija. Escoriados los surcos, falto de nieve todo, crispado en el ahogo. Por los canales un brillo de venas congeladas. Dedos artríticos el filo de los árboles. El terral un cuerpo glauco cubierto por un gel transparente. Fosforescencia de calcio la grava, molida por la ausencia de aire. Una saliva metálica, un polvo helado la arada. Emanan apenas el barro, la paja, el ramerío, grumos ocre y marrón. Abajo, como aliento ventral, el valle, un cuenco de madera. Y muy adentro, el apretado corazón de un pino, como una irradiación de manos húmedas.
Frost in Uxon, the land icebound, smothered by frozen light. The furrows are braided, no snow anywhere, but clenched and stifled. Along the canals, a sheen of frozen veins, a ridge of trees like arthritic fingers. Bare ground, a grey-green body covered in transparent gel. Gravel is calcium phosphorescence, ground down by lack of air. Ploughland, a metallic spittle, a frozen dust. Clay, straw, bare branches hardly emerging, clots of brown and ochre. Down, way down, like a deep breath, the valley, a wooden bowl, and far within, the squeezed heart of a pine, like the splayed radiance of wet hands.
The next poem, I had to write a poem for children on science. So this is what I imagined. El elefante de Arquímedes. Sacude las costras terrosas y gruesas, las ancas enormes, la falda de holanes. Levanta las patas temibles y mueve una cola muelle. Arroja su trompa toda una conjura, retumba en el cielo la furia de Cirros y con un berrido desproporcionado se lanza al pantano. Allí, revolcando las aguas grumosas, como si del cielo cayera ese trueno, en la turbia mezcla de lodo y de grasas, sumerge su rabia. La ciénaga se abre y acoge su peso, las ondas rodean su mole furiosa y la densa masa que el agua despliega aquieta a la bestia.
Archimedes' elephant. It shakes its thick hide, scabby with soil, the enormous haunches with furbelow skirts. It lifts up fearsome feet and swings a delicate tail. Its trunk hurls out a great imprecation, a rumbling in heaven of cumulus rage. And with a huge, almighty bellow, it dives in the marsh, churning the clotted waters there, as though the thunder might fall from the sky. In the turbid mixture of mud and of grease, it drowns its anger. The swamp opens up and embraces that weight, while waves swirl round its furious bulk. And in the dense mass that water unfolds, the creature goes quiet.
The next poem is for Alejandra de la Paz. Brisa. Como no hay realidad, dependo ahora, entre tú y yo, del ruido de las hojas, de las señales de los muertos, de la vibración tenue del alma. Como no hay realidad, tú vas y vienes como el viento, que está y desaparece. Hace mucho que no te cuento nada. ¿Quién soy? ¿Quién eres tú sin mí? No sé describir el desacomodo, el seguimiento. Queda restituir, si se puede, una coloración de cristal. Quiero la suavidad, el agua quiero, que se deposite físicamente en paz, que algo se encienda en ti.
Breeze. Since nothing is real, I depend now, between you and me, on the sound of the leaves, on the signals made by the dead, on the frail vibration of the soul. Since nothing is real, you come and go like the wind that is here and then vanishes. For a long time now, I've told you nothing. Who am I? Who are you without me? I can't describe the awkwardness, what follows. We still need to restore, if possible, a tinting of glass. I want gentleness. I want water, physically, peacefully, to pour down, so that something may catch fire in you and in me, like a wind that kisses.
The next poem was written after I've seen a boy, a Palestinian boy, crossing the border several years ago, and with some bombs in his body, and decided in the last moment not to sacrifice himself. And I think in this moment, when all those horrible things are happening in Gaza and in the border and between two people, I think it's very relevant, and it's a poem of hope, and we need to have hope. Niño bomba. El niño se lleva la mano al diente, duda. Las bombas no le han explotado. Todo su cuerpo, cuerpecillo ahora, se sacude. No sabe si también se tiene que quitar el calzoncillo. No puede enseñar su diminuta e inerme creencia en sí. Quizás eso lo salvó, lo hizo dudar. No se sabe ante las cámaras, tampoco lo piensa. ¿Qué puede pensar el niño? Volver a ser un cuerpo mondo, un temblor, amedrentado de vida, un gesto mínimo que la cámara y la pantalla aprietan como un aceite de paz. Todos somos en ese temblor, ganas de vida, oración, tartamudear en un vacío alrededor del mal, un gesto que es de todos, el pudor infantil, el cuerpo desnudo que quiere conservarse, protegerse, crecer. Así, ese niño, esa visión del niño, como un aceite lento, nos abarca y hay que correr a protegerlo, abrazarlo, sacarlo de esa escena, paralizado de horror. Lo que no pasó, que gracias a Dios no pasó, y ahora el niño y sus vigilantes y nosotros somos todos ese aceite, ese calor oleaginoso, obligatorio, temblando.
Child bomb. The boy lifts a hand to his tooth, in doubt. The bombs have not blown him up. His entire body shakes, and he doesn't know if he should remove his underpants. He cannot show his tiny and defenseless belief in himself. He doesn't know he's in front of the cameras, nor does he even think about it. What can the boy think? Go back to being a plain body, a trembling, a slight gesture which the camera fastens on like an oil of peace. We are all this hunger for life. Prayer is a void around evil. A gesture which is everyone's, a childish shame, the naked body that wants to preserve itself and grow. And so this vision of the child's, like a slow oil, wraps itself around us. We must make haste to protect it, remove it from this scene, paralyzed with horror. That which did not happen. Now the child and his guards and ourselves are that oil, that oily and necessary warmth.
Orfebrería. Pieza a pieza, paso a paso, junta la caca el escarabajo. Hace ruidos y se agita, rueda que rueda el ilusionista. Por la cal y el terregal, a pie juntillas intenta arar. Nada hay que no le sirva, paja, cerillos, sal y lascivia. Al final, en tornasol, bate y alza esa perla marrón.
The jeweler's craft. This is the poem that gave us the title for the book, with all its magic. Step by step and little by little, he's gathering dung, the scarab beetle. Noises he'll make and paw the air, a trick well known to the conjurer. Over lime and dusty ground, with feet together, he tries to plough. There is nothing that cannot be used. Straw, spent matches, salt and lust. Finally, like beaten gold, he hammers, lifts high this rich brown globe.
This poem is to my two children, Nicolás and Mateo. Diques. Yo quiero acompañarte a ti y a ti, en cada paso, seguir sus huellas sin pisarlas, verlos cruzar de playa en playa, sin pisarlas, claro, solo seguirlas. Quiero ir alzando surcos allí donde plantaron la inhalación, allí donde se fueren. Quiero ser en la sombra de su sombra un hueco cálido en el cual puedan regresar a cogerse, si la ocasión lo pinta o lo despintan los vaivenes. Todo queda vacío cuando se van, y has de llenarlo nuevamente, suavemente diría, de sí, de sus anhelos, sin disolverlos, y colmarlo en ustedes, ahora que no están, para así ser de nuevo en cuanto a ustedes. Quiero ser quien salpique de aliento su propio guarecerse, para no intimidar ni incomodar, y que de nuevo puedan las olivas llenar el plato común, sin la discordia, al contrario, el contorno, encandilados, sin aleccionarlos. Quiero ser agua que se recoge en una curva del río haciendo playa, para que los patitos salten de costado, como mi padre me enseñó y yo a ustedes. Lleguemos a puerto, como siempre.
Breakwaters. I want to go along with you and you on every step you take, to follow footprints without trampling them, to see you crossing beach after beach, making tracks there where you planted an in-breath, or where you vanished into cartwheels. Everything empty is replenished gently, I'd say, from itself, from your longings, without dissolving or filling them to the brim. To be a warm hollow in the shade in which to take refuge if the need arises, or if comings and goings despoil it. To be the one who sprinkles with his breaths his own sheltering, so as not to intimidate or trouble, and so that the olives may once again fill the common dish of harmony. To be the water that gathers at a bend in the river, creating a beach where the pebbles may skip sideways, ducks and drakes, with a skim and a skip, as my father showed me, and I showed both of you.
The next poem could be seen or read as a short history of Mexico. And it has to do with a child bomb because it's also about violence and hope at the end of the bend of the river. It's called Traverseras, and it has a line by Ann Carson. There will be a tunnel and light. Cuando tenía 8 años, un túnel atravesaba la carretera de terracería que años después sería asfaltada. Paso del agua en lluvias y de arañas en secas. Yo y mis hermanas atravesábamos rumbo al resplandor del otro lado, una travesía apenas penumbra de sombras benévolas y aleteos. Arriba, por esa carretera atravesaron luego camiones de redilas de la batida secreta en contra de la guerrilla de Atoyac. Atravesaron también años después camiones y camiones con troncos de la tala, los cuerpos recostados bajados de la sierra. Más adelante dejaron unos bultos, cuerpos arrumbados del narco, un pastoreo anónimo en una guerra anémica. Apenas ayer las 2 bocas del túnel las tapiaron, con restos de basura abandonados, como quien no quiere la cosa. En el tapiado ahora siembran milpas, esmirriadas que apenas sobreviven. Todo eso se lo van a llevar las primeras crecidas y unos niños correrán por el túnel de luz, de felicidad, en atrabancada travesura, y todo volverá a sorprender sin dejar rastros, ni restos, ni vestigios.
Crossings. There will be a tunnel and light. When I was 8 years old, a tunnel ran under the gravel road that years later would be tarmacked. A path for water when it rained and for spiders when dry. My sisters and I would go through it towards the brightness at the far end. A barely twilit crossing of kindly shadows and flutterings. Overhead, along this highway, flatbed trucks crossed later on, used in the clandestine hunting down of Atoyac guerrilla fighters. Years later, too, lorry after lorry would cross with trees from the logging, felled bodies being brought down from the mountains. Later, there were abandoned bundles, ruined bodies from the narcotics trade, anonymous shepherding in an anemic war. Only yesterday, the 2 mouths of the tunnel were walled up with remains of abandoned refuse, scattered quite casually. In the walling up, they're now sowing sweet corn, spindly plants that barely flourish. The first heavy rains will carry all this away, and children will charge through this tunnel of light from joy to joy, crossing pell-mell, and everything will once again astonish without leaving rubbish or remains or any trace.
Well, after all this suffocation, let's move to a woody. I think trees are very important for us to breathe. And so this poem is about some trees. Chopos is its title. Chopos, alzados, subiendo por sí mismos, talla verde en el azul, arañando enredaderas de aire. Cada una su propia alzadura, cabellos al viento, su propia plegaria. Surgen de la masa más verde, articulándose mechas de voluntad en el espacio, quietos, altivos, concentrados en su apogeo, parpadeando de luz, inmateriales casi. Tiemblan de miedo cada hoja, cada rama, crines hirsutas, verticales, comendadores de Dios, poetas de la displicencia o el cansancio, pinceles del azul, panteras verdes, recortados al agua, casi reflejos, tótemes de cristal.
Black poplars, towering, rising all by themselves, a green carved out of blue, clawing at creepers of air. Each one its own hoisting, hair in the wind, its own litany. They emerge from the greenest mass, uttering themselves, willful fuses in space. Calm, proud, centered on their crowns, glittering with light, incorporeal almost. They tremble with fear, each leaf, each branch, a thick upstanding mane. God's ancient knights, poets of indifference or weariness. Brushstrokes of blue, green jaguars. Cutouts in water, virtual reflections, totems of glass.
And the last poem, which is to Anna Crowe, I wrote it being in Norwich with her for the launching of Peatlands, my previous book in English translated by her. And I spent the day, it was the day, my sister's birthday that very day. And I entered the cathedral, Norwich Cathedral, which has a wonderful ceiling. And so this poem, it's kind of seeing the cathedral as part of the sky and as part of my family in the cathedral, within the cathedral and in the sky. And its title is Clinamen. En el artesonado de la catedral de Norwich, elevándose hasta lo infinito, una curva lleva a otra que lleva a otra en un oleaje ingobernable, voluta por voluta. Y en el cielo del cielo las nubes, querubines y orejas y pies, con los ojos y el cuerpo y los ángeles, dando vueltas convulsas. No sé cuándo empezamos a ser parte ni cuándo la ola girará sin nadie que la siga. Pero ahora vamos, en una punta del ala mi hermano, y yo en la otra como gran regocijo, viento en popa, olfateando esa playa de hornos y sanguijuelas en que nos bañábamos. Y mi hermana María vuela también allá en lontananza, en la rueda de la fortuna en que viajamos, porque hoy es su cumpleaños, porque hoy se cumplen en una sola arista todas esas curvas y estrías de la madera y crecen hacia lo alto por pliegues y pilares y se alzan en olas dando vueltas, piruetas, disparadas al techo, iluminándonos. Y el tiempo resta sobre su propio peso, se acomoda en la piedra que lo contiene y todo vuelve a seguir su curso en un lento, iluminado clinamen. Allá arriba, desde ese vértice, disparándose en todas direcciones.
Clinamen. In the vaulted roof of Norwich Cathedral, soaring up into the infinite, one curve lifts another that lifts another in an ungovernable surge, volute upon volute. And in the sky of heaven, the clouds, cherubim and ears and feet with eyes and the body and the angels convulsively revolving. I don't know just when we begin to be part of it, nor whether the surging wave will swerve with no one to follow it. But here we go, my brother at one wingtip, and I at the other like a great rejoicing, wind astern, sniffing that beach of leeches and furnaces where we used to swim. And my sister Maria flies as well, there in the distance, in the wheel of fortune in which we travel, because today is her birthday. Because today there come together in a single aris all those curves and timber flutings, and they multiply upwards in folds and columns and rise in waves, revolving, pirouetting, shooting up into the roof, shedding light on us. And time remains firm upon its own weight, adapting itself to the stone that holds it, and everything returns to its usual groove in a slow, illumined clinamen, shooting away in all directions from that apex high above.
Oh, lads, what a treat. Shinga and Gurmila Magav, thank you very, very much. What a lovely collaboration and connection the two of you have. I could see when Pedro was reading the Spanish poems, you could see Anna nodding along and almost singing along. And I thought when Anna was reading the poems, it was almost as if Pedro was dancing to the poems at the time. Beautiful connection there, Gurmila Magav. When Tamuging Keshnu or okay. Yeah, so Q&A. I try not to come up with like fancy wanky questions, just genuine questions that I'd like an answer to, I suppose, so just bear with. For Louis and Pedro, I guess because you both work in universities, you're academics, I'd be curious to know, when you're going to write, and I have a separate question for Anna, just in relation to translations. I'd be curious to know, Louis and Pedro, when you approach writing poems, do you try and separate the academic voice, that mind, or do you bring it with you? Is it a hindrance? Is it something that adds to it? Do you think, if either of you would be happy to try and answer that? Thank you, please.
Shall I answer? Well, when I was student, they had some lecturers who came and said that if we wanted to write, we should go to other places. We shouldn't be there. And for my amazement, I discovered that those things are again and again being said to the students in the university. I don't know why they don't say that on people studying music or visual arts, but we tend to separate the academic and the creative work in literature, and I think that's a mistake. I think, of course, not everybody has to write poems, no, or write other things. I think the literature is a common, well, it's something that we do together, and there are some of us who are able to put that, which is common, in lines that we give back to the world, and we share again with everybody. And the teaching, the academic world is it's, for me, it's a continuation of that thing that I do when I write a poem or when I'm living.
I don't really have a satisfactory answer to that, but I do think of them as very separate and very distinctive. But by the same token, I think academic writing wouldn't work at all unless there was some creative element to that as well. And I suppose the fortunate thing about being involved in academic employment is, certainly from the point of view of somebody writing the Irish language, that it allows you to do deep diving exercises into the older tradition and to discover new possibilities of language that probably wouldn't be possible otherwise. But for me, they're very, very distinctive, and I carve out time and space and separate for writing poems. Not because academic writing isn't creative, but it's the form of the poem itself. The thing is, eventually, academic work rewards effort. Poetry doesn't always, you know.
Thank you. And just to Anne, I suppose, I'm curious, you know, you write your own poetry, you're a very well established and accomplished poet in your own right, and you obviously have an incredible talent and interest in translating the work of others. I'm just curious how you approach both differently, you know, creating your own poems and then working on the poems written by someone else. I suppose how do you find, I guess, the similarities or differences in both processes are? Yeah, I'd just love to hear your take on that, please.
Yes, well, I do find that I'm not usually able to do both at once. I seem to have, I'm into translation mode, or I'm into writing my own poetry mode. But I have learnt a lot from translating other voices and trying things out. So there is that crossover, but it's usually one or the other, I have to say. Yeah.
So fágamid an sonnig gur míle mágah goléir a ríist míle buchas de Louis de Paor, Pedro Serrano and Anna Crowe gur míle mágah agus míle níthe hart fós, so the fáilte róh teach chuig an Long Valley Ling, agus gur míle mágah an tróragah sin, so gur míle mágah agus slán óile.